I tell people there's 3 phases to brain fitness. First is you got to eat right. I mean, you can't outthink a bad diet. I think we talked about that earlier. I don't think, unless you're an alchemist like Saint Germain and you could transmute junk food into health food.
Kale and chocolate into kale, but it tastes like chocolate on the way in.
Yeah.
That's a great
So that might work in a stage show, but I don't think it will work in reality, right? But eating healthy is good. And like you were talking about B3s earlier, niacin. I think every person should be on a low-dose niacin. Most people don't realize that even Bill with the big book of AA, he used niacin.
Oh, he did?
To get off the alcohol.
Niacin is B3.
Yes.
And the challenge with high dose is flushing, isn't it?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So, but they have non-flushing niacin now, don't they?
Right. You start off with just a little bit.
So you wouldn't even notice a low dose.
The key here now is that a lot of people don't realize that the fat that they're consuming, the negative fats, the seed oils, those are being deposited into their capillaries. So when you get your blood checked, they don't even check that. But niacin will blow out those capillaries.
Wow, because niacin is, I believe, one of the most effective treatments for reducing triglycerides and also one of the best for raising HDL. I might be those might be a bit off, but I know it is. It was very sought after as a treatment when I worked in cardiology.
But it's so cheap. And nobody can make any money and nobody can patent it.
Right.
So everybody should be on low dose.
For brain function?
I use a product from Optimum Health Systems. It's called Be Awake because it has a combination of B vitamins. And I do it in the morning, 4 of them. And in the middle of my meditation, it doesn't really give you a flush, but you feel that kind of niacin high that happens.
I've had the flush before too, and it does feel like an interesting, because sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Yeah. It's such a foreign feeling though. You're like, wait, I'm hot, you can feel it, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's intolerable, but for someone else, maybe it is.
Some people are more sensitive, so you just take less. I mean,
but
if you're not tolerating it, that means your capillaries are probably clogged.
Interesting.
So you need to keep, so many people, if it's a little hard, they don't want to do it. No, sometimes it's got to be a little hard before it gets easy.
That's the walking in the grass.
Yeah. So, and then the next step that I tell people for brain fitness is you got to move and breathe. We're not sedentary beings. Our ancestors, when they look at our smartwatches and things, they're trying to get us to 10,000 steps, which is a big movement for a lot of people. But if you were Amish, you'd be a lazy one.
Right, at 10,000 steps, right.
They do 20, 25 steps a day.
20, 25,000.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. So when you think about it, but we can do things like Tai Chi, yoga. These are all things proven.
Technologies.
And what a lot of people don't know about is Tai Chi and yoga were designed to just get your brain ready for meditation.
Oh, really?
They weren't meant for exercise. Like most people jump
You weren't supposed to get a green juice and then they weren't doing that in the ashrams?
Yeah, right. So what most people do with yoga, unfortunately, is they don't stick around for the yoga nidra. That's the most important part. That's when you get the neuroplasticity. That's when you get the real brain fitness. Just doing the physical exercise, you're just stressing yourself out.
Yeah.
And then the brain fitness part is where you can use nature. You can walk out into nature. Earthing is a good way to tune in because our brain actually, remember I said it's syncing with its environment. So if you and I were to go down to the ocean, sit by the ocean, we would relax, right? A lot of people say, I love the ocean.
Yeah.
Well, of course you do because the ocean is generating a 10 hertz evoked potential, alpha.
From the sound of the waves or from just the water itself?
Everything is vibrating, like the cameras we have in this room, the mics, they are teeming with energy and sound and vibration. But we see it, and we make it solid. But the reality is that it's just light, sound, and vibration. It's smoke and mirrors. But when we get to the ocean, there's a lake, a stream, a body of water, even a bubbler in your office.
So relaxing, yeah.
It triggers your brain to create alpha activity. Alpha triggers your gut to make acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is what happens when you fall in love. So you get oxytocin and all those things there's 54 neurotransmitters. I won't mention them all, but your brain waves are what triggers the production of these neurotransmitters or activities. Like in certain activities we do, we'll get high on our own supply, but we can trigger that in ourselves by meditation, breathing techniques, breath work, things of that nature, brain tap. These are all things that people do to trigger their brain to get it back into a balanced state.
Wow, that's so interesting. So just being with water does that. And you were also mentioning earlier before we hit record about candlelight.
Yeah.
Can we talk a bit about that? Because
sure. We were touring India, and there's 6 universities called the All Indian Institute of Medical Sciences. They're probably the leading authority on meditation and yogic principles. So I was touring there to show them, because their head of physiology is on our board of research. So we were doing some research with them. And Dr. Varun, I've been published with him many times now in PubMed about breath work and brain balance and things like that. But he said to me at first, he goes, Patrick, you're cheating. And I said, what do you mean I'm cheating? He says, well, you're using this device to do what takes 30 years for somebody to meditate and master. And I said, well, Varun, have you ever used a candle? Oh, yeah, I use a candle all the time to meditate. I said, well, you're cheating. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, a candle flickers at 10 hertz frequency. When you get to alpha, incredible things happen to the brain. We get a gamma burst and we get a delta burst. It's like the whole brain goes, it lights up. And then if you can stay in that zone, that's the zone when people are meditating. Now, there's another zone that's theta that most people never reach, but they talk about it all the time online. You think everybody's in theta. I can tell you.
I'm in it right now, actually, yeah.
So in the theta state is 7.8 hertz. So I said, have you ever meditated in the mountains? I said, have you ever wondered why the yogis meditate in the mountains? He says, no, I just thought it was private. I said, no, that mountain is resonating at 7.8 hertz frequency. That's the Schumann frequency.
Interesting.
That's theta.
So just being, the environment helps because we start to
your environment changes you.
Yeah.
So you're in the environment. We act as a biofeedback mechanism. So our biology is feeding back our environment. So when we're in the mountains and we're there at tree line and 7.8 hertz frequencies happening, we're now in harmony with the planet. Now,
that's why I feel so good in forests and by the ocean.
Yeah. With theta produces GABA. GABA is a precursor to DMT.
Oh.
So when people want to have a spiritual experience, you can't have the experience without DMT or with GABA in your system. But most people, when we measure their brains, and I've been fortunate over the last 10 years to measure over 30,000 brains, very few people have even enough to make anything. There's no, quote, spiritual world for them because they're not in that frequency. When you think of frequency, I tell people, what do you frequently see? That's your frequency because it's going to show up in your life. So when you start meditating and you start using the tools that are out there and you start getting the brain into these balanced state, and it's not about one brainwave state, it's about all of them.